Hello everybody and welcome back to Key History Made Easy, the history series where we take a look at a key event, person or battle of the past and break it down into one clear-cut and easy to follow history. In today's video we are going to be sticking with the theme of the last and keeping our eyes firmly to the skies. But instead of looking over Hawaii and Oahu, we will be looking towards the coasts of Britain and the English Channel, looking at the who, what, where, when, how and why of the Battle of Britain 1940. Now, as always, before we get into the main part of the video, we have some numbers that will give a feel for the magnitude and the importance of the battle. During the Battle of Britain, the Luftwaffe outnumbered the RAF by around 2 to 1. By the end, 1,887 German aircraft had been destroyed, whereas only 1,023 RAF aircraft were lost. 2,662 German aircrew were killed altogether. 520 RAF fighter command pilots were killed. 200 men were killed flying with Coastal Command, and 718 RAF bomber command pilots and crew were killed during the battle. It is generally believed that the fate of Western Europe now hung in the balance of a showdown between Hitler and Churchill, but who would blink first? The battle is so often seen as a heroic good versus evil clash of unimaginable magnitude. If England had not fought, this would have brought on the seaborne invasion of the UK and sealed the fate of all of Western Europe. Brave young men on both sides fighting thousands of miles in the sky at hundreds of miles per hour trying to shoot one another down. By this point, Hitler believed that the RAF were down to their last 200 fighters. This was due to poor information received from the Luftwaffe intelligence. While the situation was a close one for the RAF, it was not at present that close. In May 1940, Hitler launches one of the most devastating operations ever seen in modern warfare, Blitzkrieg, initiating lightning attacks headed by armoured divisions followed up by infantry vigorously supported by the dominant Luftwaffe against the Netherlands, Belgium and France. During the ensuing chaos of the European Blitzkrieg, Churchill is appointed the Prime Minister of Great Britain. The British Expeditionary Force in France is forced into a humiliating retreat to the French coast and the fabled evacuation of Dunkirk from the 27th of May to the 4th of June 1940. With the Western continent now firmly in the hands of the Nazis, Britain and her empire now stand alone against one of the greatest war machines the world has ever seen. Hitler was, however, wary regarding the invasion of the UK, as he believed it would take thousands of men and machines. Many of the war cabinet in the UK were in favour of making a deal with Hitler instead of committing to fight. Taking a break from the narrative of the battle to discuss some of the key figures. Firstly, Sir Winston Leonard Spencer Churchill. He became the PM for Britain during the spring of 1940. During which time Germany was rolling armoured divisions through Europe, so it would be fair to say he took over at a reasonably precarious time. The crucial thing to remember about Churchill during this period was that he was the one who refused to make a deal with Hitler, and it was he who wanted and urged the population to fight alongside him and the British military, rallying the nation with famous speeches, quote, "The battle for France is over. I expect the battle for Britain is about to begin. Hitler knows he will have to break us on this island or lose the war." End quote. Finally, and potentially most important, he was able to keep alive the threat of the war and the invasion reaching British soil, when the war looks so far away, and it is this spirit that can be and must be considered as one of the main reasons as to why the British were able to fend off the invasion and win the Battle of Britain. Hermann Wilhelm Goering was the supreme commander of the Luftwaffe during World War II and arguably Hitler's closest friend and confidant. A former World War I fighter pilot ace who now enjoyed the finer things in life that Nazi leadership allowed him, such as fine art, food and exotic animals. Arguably, such distractions drew away his attention from the task of gaining air superiority over the UK and an attributing factor to his own failures. Goering made promises to Hitler that his Luftwaffe would pave the way for the German legions to invade the UK, promises such as the south of England defences would fall in 4 days, and in 4 weeks the RAF would be completely eliminated. Air Chief Marshal Hugh Caswell Tremenhere Dowding was arguably one of the most important people for the UK during the Battle of Britain. As the Commander-in-Chief of Fighter Command, he would be the mastermind behind the defence of the UK. He oversaw the development of the air defence system named the Dowding System, which we will look at a little bit later in the video. He would push for more funding for the RAF, which would eventually be used to develop the most famous plane of this conflict, the Supermarine Spitfire. He also clashed with many of the other chiefs in Fighter Command, notably Air Vice Marshal Lee Mallory, who wanted to fight the Luftwaffe over the Channel to keep the fighting away from the towns and cities of the UK. But Dowding demanded that the RAF engage the Luftwaffe over the British island, due to the fact that if an RAF pilot is downed and not killed, they may be retrieved, saved and fly again, whereas the Luftwaffe would not have this luxury. Every plane downed for the Germans would be a pilot or crew killed or prisoner. It is this home court advantage that enabled the RAF to overcome the huge numerical advantage the Luftwaffe had. Air Vice Marshal Keith Park, or the Defender of London as he was soon to be dubbed after the battle itself. He was the single commander for the RAF in the southeast of England, commanding some 30 squadrons. His 11 Group on the southeast coast would take the brunt of the attacks made by the Luftwaffe. Park also had fallings out with Lee Mallory, who at the time was the commander of 12 Group. He became jealous of Park and his key role in the defence of Britain, so much so that Mallory and his air formation, the Big Wing, often ran over into 11 Group's airspace to try and get in on the action. Lord Ted Eyre, head of the RAF in 1947, is quoted praising Park and his actions during the battle. Quote, "If any one man won the Battle of Britain, he did. I don't believe it is recognised how much this one man, with his leadership, his calm judgment and his skill, did to save not only the country, but the world." Okay then, so we have discussed the key figures of the battle, and now we need the background and the build-up. While the Luftwaffe were controlling the skies, the Royal Navy was still in control of the seas. The British were using this to fuel and feed their massive empire all around the world, and Goering's Luftwaffe believed if these supply lines could be severed, then Britain would be crippled. As the Luftwaffe began to bomb British shipping, the effects are felt instantly and reverberate all around the empire, with soldiers and civilians poorly fed and supplied alike. The Nazis began to construct airfields in France so bombers could more easily attack merchant and military shipping, but also for the preparation for the bombing of the island of Britain itself. As the bombers are sent to Britain, the raid causes chaos in the UK. The Stuka bombers are protected by the Messerschmitt 109s, which had an unmatched climbing speed at the time, packing up to 55 seconds of machine gun fire and cannons. It was the most devastating single-seater fighter of 1940. For now. On the 10th of July 1940, the Battle of Britain begins. The Luftwaffe sends 60 bombers to attack a large British convoy in the Channel. However, as the ships come into view on the horizon, so do 5 RAF squadrons ready to meet the German planes head-on. For the first time, the RAF now have a weapon that can match the Messerschmitt blow for blow, the Supermarine Spitfire. While it is known that during the battle more Luftwaffe planes were shot down by the older Hurricanes, the Spitfire has become the centrepiece of the battle due to its constantly evolving design and performance. This meant that it constantly outclassed the German fighters. During this battle, the British lost 1 warship for a total of 10 German aircraft destroyed. The head of German Air Force intelligence, Beppo Schmidt, played a large part in Germany's eventual defeat in the Battle of Britain. He is widely regarded as Goering's yes man, telling the German commander what he wanted to hear rather than the facts, which in turn massively affected the decisions and actions taken by the Luftwaffe during the course of the battle. In turn, Goering then passes this misinformation on to Hitler, further clouding the picture that Hitler had of his future invasion plans. Beppo Schmidt constantly ignored the radar defence system the British had engineered to protect themselves. He even tells Goering that the German fighters are superior and they can be produced quicker. These were both lies. The Dowding system was a chain of 21 300 feet radar masts, starting in the southern and eastern coast of England and moving all around to the north, and they are able to detect enemy aircraft from over 120 miles away. If the Luftwaffe would try to get around this by flying too low, there were 30 more smaller masts to detect these low-flying aircraft. The RAF would know if the Luftwaffe put planes in the sky from almost the minute they took off. On top of this, the RAF had 30,000 volunteers manning observation posts all around the coasts and cities, night and day, supplementing what radar could not see, such as height, formations and numbers. All of this meant that reports of enemy formations reached fighter command in less than 40 seconds. During this time, the Luftwaffe had no idea that the RAF could detect and see their movements over the channel. On the 16th of July, Hitler issues Directive 16, calling for the preparation for Operation Sea Lion, the invasion of Britain. We must remember here that Hitler still believes his Luftwaffe are crippling a weakening Britain due to the information being passed on to him by Göring. In preparation for the invasion, river barges are massed on the French coastline, ready to transport the initial invasion force of 500,000 men. Paratroopers are being trained for specific target drops. However, throughout all this preparation, Hitler still holds on to the hope that Churchill will back down and agree to a deal. Not because Hitler now had a change of heart and wanted to stop the fighting, but to save precious Nazi resources so they could be deployed on the bitter Eastern Front. On the 19th of July, Hitler makes a speech to Germany, warning Britain and Churchill to negotiate peace or face the consequences. Within 1 hour of the speech ending, the offer to negotiate is rejected by Churchill. Hitler thusly orders an intensification of the air war on Britain to secure air superiority over the beachheads and give his threat of invasion more credibility. In early August, Hitler tells Göring to lay the foundations for the total destruction of Britain's fighter defence, codename Eagle Day. August 13th, 1940, known to the Luftwaffe as Eagle Day. This was a mass effort to knock out the fighter defence of 11 Group defending the southeast of England by bombing its airfields, the potential landing grounds for Operation Sea Lion. The main aim of Eagle Day was to stop the ability of fighter command to generate sorties in the southeast of England and to roll the RAF inland to gain superiority over the Channel. Now, here is where the problems come in. Bad weather reports postponed the attacks. However, some pilots and crews received the message, so never left at all. Some received the message after taking off and were unable to turn back. However, some never got the message at all and continued with the attack. Consequently, only a small fraction of the force arrives on the British coast. The RAF scramble and strike swiftly, downing the attacking planes. 47 German planes are shot down and 86 pilots killed, missing or captured. The dive bombers which had wreaked havoc in France were now being crushed by fighter command. Adding to the issues faced by the Luftwaffe, Hitler is spending most of his time away at the Bergdorf or his Eagle's Nest. Being so far away from the action, decision-making was slow and reactionary measures could not be taken without Hitler's consent. Some bombers did make it through and managed to drop their payloads on 11 Group airfields, but just 24 hours after the attack, British airfields were fully operational again. Adding to the German woes of Eagle Day, Beppo Schmidt continues to feed lies to Göring, informing him of 70 downed RAF fighters, once again clouding the picture of the battle the German leadership was receiving. By this point, Britain is now producing fighters faster than ever. In July 1940, 496 Spitfires and Hurricanes were made against 240 Messerschmitts. Adding to this, as mentioned at the beginning of this video, every RAF plane shot down did not equate to a pilot lost, whereas every Luftwaffe plane lost was a crew or a pilot lost, captured or killed, meaning the standard of pilot the Luftwaffe were able to turn out quickly declined. The Germans had even more to worry about, as the British had now learned from a downed airman of the German bombing technology, the Knickerbein system, a series of dots and dashes that would guide the pilot to a designated target to be bombed and then back to Germany, allowing the Germans to now bomb at night, making the huge RAF spotter and observation corps redundant, bringing in a technological battle in alongside the Battle of Britain. By August 15th, Göring now realises that the south coast of Britain is so well defended by its RAF fighters that he decides to change his targets. He moves to the north coastline, launching roughly 2,000 Luftwaffe sorties with the hopes of rolling the RAF inland and giving the German army anywhere that they could get their hands on to establish a safe landing zone for the invasion of Britain. Göring once again learns a painful lesson. 75 Luftwaffe planes are shot down in a single day, earning this particular Thursday the title Black Thursday amongst the Luftwaffe. Contrary to this, the British very unsympathetically name it the Greatest Day. It is only now that the Germans realise that the British must have a detection system spanning their entire coastline and heavy fighter defence in the Midlands and the North by 12 Group and 13 Group respectively. So Goering's tactical change is to instruct the Messerschmitt fighters to more closely protect the Stuka bombers by flying much closer to provide more protection. However, this only seemed to handicap the Messerschmitts, now having to fly much slower and not being able to use their speed to attack the RAF planes. By mid-August 1940, pilots on both sides are now beginning to show the strain of a continued combat period. During the heights of the battle, RAF pilots were flying up to 5 to 6 sorties per day. Short and intense combat kept pilots exhausted, quite different from that of the infantryman down on the ground. However, German and British pilots had vastly different experiences when not flying or on duty. The RAF fighter pilots were effectively rock stars, and after flying all day would often go out to the cities where they were based, drinking all night, come back for 2 or 3 hours of sleep and fly again in the morning. However, this was completely different for the Luftwaffe pilots stationed in France. Public opinion of the German pilots was not particularly high, so going out and partying was not much of an option. This in turn affected the young German pilots' morales drastically. The 16th of August 1940, the Luftwaffe finally strikes success, launching an attack heading for Southampton. 84 Stukas protected by 214 Messerschmitt 109s and 43 Messerschmitt 110s. The RAF are overwhelmed by the fighter support and the Stukas can hit their targets. One chain-home radar mast on the Isle of Wight is hit and an RAF base at Tangier is badly hit, killing 10 servicemen and wrecking one hangar. During this time, US airman Billy Fisk engages the German planes. He is hit, which causes his fuel tank to ignite. He survives the encounter but later dies of his injury, making him the first American casualty of World War II. Sunday, August 18th, the hardest day. The Luftwaffe now began to fly lower in an attempt to avoid the chain-home radar system. This achieves moderate success, but chain low still picks many of the planes up. This is also the time Churchill rallied the nation around himself and the RAF with his famous speech, quote, "Never in the field of human conflict was so much owed by so many to so few." It is here that the aces of the RAF become prevalent. An ace was a pilot with 5 or more kills to their name. Some amateur pilots managed to go through the entire Battle of Britain without hitting a single enemy. Adding to this, around 80% of pilots shot down never even saw the plane that got them. Beppo Schmidt continues to pass more incorrect information on to Goering, leaving out anything regarding the recent successes. Because of this, Goering now decides to change tactics and begin night raids, making fighter command redundant. Little did Goering know, but the Luftwaffe were coming close to pushing 11 Group back away from the south coast of England. More of the same for a few more weeks would have seen the Luftwaffe gain air superiority over the south coast skies. The German pilots now switched to bombing raids during the night using the Knickerbein system to guide them to their targets. The plan was to simply bomb the UK around the clock until Churchill submits. For the first time, bombs are dropped on civilian targets by the Luftwaffe after missing the Thames oil refinery on the 22nd of August. This effectively opens the door for Churchill to launch his long-planned bombings of Berlin with a greater likelihood of getting both the public and the War Cabinet to agree to it. However, Berlin was at the very limit of the RAF bomber range, and the damage that it would eventually cause in the early stages was light when compared to what would come later. For the RAF, the first night raid on Berlin is unsuccessful, but a few days later 8 German civilians are killed, reverberating around the whole city, not because of who was killed, but simply because the German people were now realising the war is coming to them. They are in danger, and this war may not be as glorious and easy to fight as first thought. This is a shocking embarrassment for Goering. In retaliation to this, Hitler sets up plans for the large-scale bombing of cities across the UK. Rather than target the RAF, they would target the people, destroy morale and turn the UK on Churchill, so Great Britain would be forced to make peace terms. As the battle continues, on September 4th, Hitler delivers an ominous speech in reaction to the recent bombings of Berlin. Quote, "If the British attack our cities, we'll wipe out theirs." End quote. By September 7th, Goering is now on the French coast to personally oversee the preparations for the bombing raids on London. More than 700 aircraft take off on course for the city. At 4:30 p.m, all of the 21 squadrons protecting London take to the sky. Dogfights over the Thames estuary with over 1,000 aircraft involved can be seen. After the raids during the day, the Luftwaffe then returned that night and every other night for 57 nights save one. The Blitz has begun. The next day, Churchill visits those worst affected, the poor in the East End. Hitler expects the British public to turn against their leaders, but they don't. Londoners come together in the most brilliant ways. Communities come together to help clear rubble, retrieve possessions from homes, and even when necessary, to dig people out from under collapsed buildings and houses. Public opinion surveys soar in favour of Churchill and a no deal with Hitler. Britain still makes further preparation for the invasion of the island and begins increasing the number of child evacuations from the cities during this time. Despite the carnage being brought about due to the Blitz, the Luftwaffe are no closer to achieving the aerial superiority of the sky needed for an invasion of Britain. Due to weather worsening as the year progresses, Goering knows that if it does not happen soon, the invasion will have to be delayed until next spring in the new campaign season. By September 12th, the weather is now becoming a real problem. Goering intensifies the bombings ready for one more big push. Intelligence being given to the Germans is that Britain now must be down to its last 200 fighters. September 15th presents the Luftwaffe with clear weather, so Goering goes for it in one last roll of the dice. This would be Battle of Britain Day. The first raid came in at Uxbridge at 11 a.m, comprising of 145 aircraft. The RAF scrambled 275 fighters, outnumbering the Luftwaffe for the first time. 12 Group, just north of London, launched the Big Wing, comprised of 56 aircraft. At 12 p.m, 6 German bombers have been downed, including one over Victoria Station. The main raid now comes in just after lunch, with 475 German aircraft in 3 columns attacking the south of London. Big Wing is scrambled again. As the Germans cross the Channel, wave after wave of RAF fighters get up to meet them. Britain was certainly not down on its last 200 fighters. The more aircraft the Luftwaffe send over, the more they lose. They would never fully recover from the mauling of Battle of Britain Day, the final count standing at 56 German aircraft to 28 RAF. It is now unavoidably clear, even to Goering, that this has been a failure. The British were not weakening, and any sort of air superiority could not be gained. The troops and landing craft being assembled on the French coast were redeployed elsewhere, and Operation Sea Lion was cancelled. Britain had survived, not just because of the heroic efforts of Fighter Command and its pilots, but also Bomber Command and the pressure this placed on the morale of the German people. The British public were also instrumental in holding firm against the potential invasion of Britain. If public opinion had turned against the war effort and Churchill, then there is no chance Churchill could have feasibly mounted any kind of resistance to a peace deal from Hitler. The victory at the Battle of Britain has been mainly credited to 3 people. Churchill, the man who decided to fight, Hugh Dowding, who created the weapon, the Dowding system, and Fighter Command Spitfires and tactics, and Keith Park, the commander of 11 Group, who wielded the weapon and fought the battle. Now, finally, we must discuss the consequences of the Battle of Britain. What did this mean for the rest of the war? Germany had now suffered its first serious setback, when the German military had seemed unstoppable throughout the rest of Europe. This gave hope to the already conquered European countries under Nazi rule. In the long term of the war, Britain had been preserved as a base for future offensives onto the continent. Bombers operating from UK air bases would devastate German industry and infrastructure. Britain could now act as a springboard for the deployment of devastating American air power, which would be vital to the later liberation of Europe. Failure to achieve air superiority over Britain encourages Hitler's decision to focus his attention east, diverting attention and resources away from the conquered Western European countries. Hitler expected an easy victory against the massive but slow beast he expected Russia to be.
Then once Russia was defeated, he expected to swing his armies round to smash into Britain and the US. His decisions from here on out would seal the fate of the Third Reich. Okay then, we have discussed the who, what, where, when, why and how of the Battle of Britain 1940. I hope this video has been helpful. If you have any questions, suggestions or concerns, please leave a comment. Thank you very much for watching. This has been Key History Made Easy, the Battle of Britain 1940.